Okay, it'll be a little bit before I share my screen.
Okay.
Since we're having lessons, I thought I would start out with a pop quiz. I already gave Shirley one of these. Well, first of all, I'll ask, what can we learn from the census? And I'll take an answer or two. What things can we learn from them? So if you have a comment, unmute yourself and share an answer with us.
We can see the location where our ancestors lived when we find them on the census.
That's one.
We
Any others?
can find out the other family members at the time that we're home.
That's another.
Age and relationship.
Very good. Yeah.
Their
Anything else?
profession, their profession.
Oh, good one. Yeah, a lot of people don't go that far over. I have a feeling you've looked at a census record or two.
I have.
Oh, okay.
Parents were born?
Let's do the quiz.
You didn't hear Shirley, Jim. She offered.
Oh,
Where their parents were born.
on later census, that's true. Yep. Okay. Does it take more water to do the census at the beginning of the census? Oh, this is a question. Does it take more water at the beginning of the census year or the end of the census year? And I wish I could see the looks. You could see the looks on some of your faces.
What?
Yes.
Do we? Okay. So that's, we don't know. Okay. I'll answer that in a little bit. Let's try another question.
National Joke Day was on Tuesday.
That was not a joke. That was not a joke. None of these are. Why did people in the South get undercounted in 1870?
Because of the Civil War, I would guess.
Civil War was over.
I know, but the realignment or resettling of people and whether, I don't know if it was a question whether to count the population very accurately or.
Yeah, yeah. You're actually getting pretty close. I'll give a little better answer to that, but that was pretty good. You'd probably get a B on that. Okay, why were some people counted as 3/5?
That's easy. It was the color of their skin.
Color of your skin determined that.
What color?
Black or mulatto.
Native American.
Native Americans were. Oh, we got that one. And I'll back this up. Okay, last one. And Shirley, I asked this to you earlier. And so hopefully you've done your research. What year was the 1790 census in Vermont?
Well, I forgot that you asked me that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I would say, I don't know, 1795.
No.
No.
But you're good in that it wasn't 1790. Actually, I'll go ahead and answer that one. Vermont wasn't a state yet in 1790, but they wanted to be. So the Census Bureau let them take their census in 1791 rather than 1790.
When were they admitted into the states?
I think 1791.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is the thing going back to the 1870 question about the South? And I, of course, had that handy census book document PDF that you shared with me. Is it because slave schedules were added at that point?
Actually, not, so I'll go ahead and answer that question. Carpetbaggers. What happened, the North, they still wanted to punish the South. And the census takers, a lot of them were carpetbaggers, and they went down there and they actually undercounted because just a minute, I'm going to tell you why we have a census. They didn't want the South to be represented.
Oh,
So they did a pretty poor count, and they probably undercounted the South, they say, by about 10 to 15%.
Well,
And because they just didn't like them. They'd gone to war with them and all that other stuff. And there were probably a lot of other reasons. So I'll go ahead and answer some of the other questions. I'll answer the water one because that one caused, especially in the 1790s, the first census, the census takers had to buy their own ink and their own paper and their own quills. So if they were working on the census and getting near the end and they didn't want to buy more ink, they added a little water to their ink to stretch it. It's kind of like whenever you have some unexpected company and you only have soup for 4 people and you've got a 5th, so you add a cup of water. They tried to stretch their ink. And one thing I want to do is go over some interesting things about the census. I'll do that in just a minute. I need to answer that other question about the 3/5. Why we have a census? It's so they could figure out the amount of well, first of all, we were a brand new country, 1790, still pretty new. We didn't know what we had. We didn't know who we had, and we didn't know where they all were. So that's kind of one reason for the census. But they wanted people enumerated. So it was for representation and taxation, according to representative numbers, which will be determined by adding the whole numbers of free persons. Now, this is for the first census, including those bound to service for a term of years, which would have been indentured servants, and excluding Indians not taxed, and 3/5 of all other people. So slaves would have been counted at this time as 3/5 of a person. Indians were not counted at all. In later years,
But it's good.
let's see, 17th Amendment, representation shall be apportioned among the several states according to their numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians. Indians weren't granted citizenship until 1924. Yes, that is 1924. Whenever you're working with the census record, you need to know who you are or where you are and when you are.
When did they start the allotment program for the reservations, Jim?
That I do not know. Maybe we need to have a class on Native American. You know, because that's something I have not worked with. The census will give us a snapshot of our country every 10 years. It will give us a snapshot of our family every 10 years. It shows how many people were here and where they were. Were they urban? Were they rural? It will give their economic status if you read enough into the census. That's why I asked at the beginning, what can you learn from the census? Names, dates, places, but there's a lot more. Physical health. In many of the census, there were health questions. Voting age and status, or are you of military age? Citizenship and national origin. And this will vary from year to year. Migration patterns. You know, they figured out in the last census that some states had lost representation. Some states gained. And these are all things that our country needs to know and things that we need to know about our ancestors. Things about the census. They may be conducted by federal marshals, may have been the Army, or it just may have been some employees. Multiple copies may have been made. A copy, the official copy should have, I'll say to Washington, Department of Commerce, Census Bureau, whoever. One copy did go to the nation's capital. Many states should have kept a copy.
Yeah.
Notice I said should have. We won't go there. Some of the early numerators were actually paid by the 100 in those early ones. If they were in an urban area, they were paid a little bit less because they could have just gone from door to door, collect the names. Rural areas, they may have had to ride half a day's ride, so they were paid more, but they may have been paid $1.50 for every 300 names. Remember, these are early $1,800. Some of these things about the census, I have this handy book. It's called the Census Book by William Dollarhide. And unfortunately, I did not find, if you can find this in PDF form, at maybe the Family Search Wiki or the Library of Congress.
Repeat that again.
It's the Census Book by William Dollarhide. There's a 1999 version. There's a 2019 version. Both are very good. One is just a little more updated. You can get much of the information at census.gov/history. That's census.gov/history. And it will tell you a bit about each census. Well, it'll tell you a lot, and each one is different. I'm going to go over some of those things, and then my plan is to follow a family through some through the census records, so that you can see what all you can learn about the family dynamics, their good times, their bad times, and a lot of things. Some important points to remember. There is a difference between census day and the actual enumeration day. I saw an eyebrow move. A census, you know, Congress is the one that sets it. They may say it's going to be 1st of June, but they cannot enumerate everybody on that day. It may be a month later. And some of the census, they actually gave them 10 months to do, some of the early 1800s, some 13 months, and the 1840 census They gave them 14 months to do it.
Wow.
So if you're trying to get an age, well, you just have to look at it and evaluate the census day versus the actual enumeration day. There can be a big difference. You need to be aware of where you are. Are we going to find a Florida census in 1810?
Yeah, but I don't think they were a state.
They were not a state. They were still part of Spain. So you have to be aware of things like that. Are you going to find an 1860 census for West Virginia? No, they were part of Virginia in 1860. So you need to be aware of that. You need to be
It was
aware.
also, Georgia was not a state either. They had just taken the Creek lands in 1810 and were passing them out. So they weren't a state yet either.
Yeah, you have to be aware of that. So you have to look at the history of your time period and era, especially on these early census, the ones before 1900, maybe 1910. You know, Alaska became a state, what, 59? Anyway, someplace along in there. Be aware, some states did state census whenever they were transitioning from a territory to a state. Do you have a question?
That was my question. was
Oh, okay.
if They were territories that did something.
Some did.
New York did.
There's a lot of things I'm going to say. Yeah, maybe. They were supposed to, so they could prove they had enough people to become a state. Just be aware whenever you're working with these, especially in Ancestry. And these are also available on Family Search, but there are some additional forms that were associated with the census. There may have been an agricultural schedule. There may have been a manufacturing schedule. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know what all of those are, but if you see them, you may want to look at them. I've looked at some agricultural. You can see how much land someone owned, how much corn they were growing, the value of their land. And there are also mortality schedules, which, if I've got this right, they will record deaths for the year prior to the census year. So that may be helpful if you have somebody that died the year before that census. They were not done all years. So, and I cannot tell you what. The first few census were done on blank pieces of paper, and the census takers had to make their own columns for about the first 50 years. And then about 1830, I believe, was the first year for pre-printed forms. And if you're ever working with some of these old census, they will only list the head of household, so, which is usually male, and then it will just have little tick marks in the column, and the columns will be how many males 5 to 10 years old. How many females 5 to 10 years old? You may look at these and think they're not much use, but there are some worksheets out there. There's some on Ancestry. I think there's some on the Family Search Wiki that you can chart the person through 1920, 1930, put their little tick mark in, and it will give you a 5-year period on their birthday. And you can perhaps trace them, but maybe not. It's rather labor intensive and the results are kind of iffy. Also an interesting thing on the 1820 census, it asked how many males 16 to 25. And then it has a column, males 16 to 18 that are not part of the count in the 16 by 25. Does anyone know why you had the extra column for 16 to 18-year-old males in 1820?
I don't know that one.
Is that a war?
Are they old enough to hold a musket? They wanted to know who was young and, you know, would make a good soldier. So exactly. Okay. 1830, 1840, they started adding lots of columns. I asked what we could learn from the census record. The 1840 census was the winner on number of columns. There are 66 tidbits of information there. That's a lot of information.
1840 is the first time they list anybody but the head of the household.
18,
Mhm.
yeah, 1850. In the 1840 census, they would also ask questions about occupation. Do you work on a canal? Do you work in this type of manufacturing? You know, I said you need to know about the history of when you are. In the 1840s, railroads were not a thing. The way to get around the country, there were a lot of canals. I'm from Indiana. We had 2 or 3 canals going through Indiana that I think you could go from New York clear to the Ohio River.
I didn't know that.
Long way around, but you know, we had canals and then railroads happened and the canals all went bankrupt. Oh, by the way, 1850 was the first year for them to use a counting machine. 2 guys figured out a way that they could help the Census Bureau count. They later formed a little company that became known as IBM. Really, it's a fact. Okay, 1850 and 1860, we have the slave schedules. 1850, we started asking for occupation, place of birth. So this will help you out. 1870 census is considered the least accurate census ever. They figure the South was undercounted by 10 to 15%. They did ask if your parents were of foreign birth. One thing I want to emphasize when you're working with the census record, look all the way across the form. Read those column headings And if you can't read the scan that well that's in Ancestry and Family Search, if you go to census.gov, if you go to Ancestry, if you go to the Family Search Wiki, you can print out the blank census forms so you can read what those headings are. Yeah, the 1890 census, the one we all want. Everybody says it doesn't exist. It does. Well, partially. They have approximately 6,000 names out of 6.3 million people. So we do have a partial. It's a very small partial. And I think actually what it is the remains of some of those copies that the states kept, but destroyed by fire. The 1950 census, which will be released on April the 1st, next year. The Census Bureau used UNIVAC to help with the data. I think they bought machine with serial number 1, but that was used in the counting. Okay, I've kind of talked about some of the things we can find. We mentioned about origin of parents, mother tongue. They're about 1910, 20. It asks, are you an immigrant? When did you immigrate? Are you naturalized? There's several census there where they ask if you're a citizen. And again, you have to note your history. When was the big immigration? When was Ellis Island and other places in full swing? Early 1900s. There were so many people coming in and from so many different places, they didn't know what to do with them or where they were coming from.
Jim, was it the 1910 census that started listing their exact birthday? The
1900 gives month and year. It also gives age, but you need to see if they add up.
Yeah.
They usually do, but census takers were interesting. Sometimes they goofed. It was about that time they would ask how many marriages. Is this marriage 1, marriage 2, and how long you have been married? This is about 1900 and 1910, I think. And one, they basically want to know if you're an anarchist. And in some of the, it's about the 1870, 80, through 4 or 5 of them, they will ask, sorry for the term, I don't mean to be rude. This is what it says. Are you deaf and dumb, idiotic, insane, blind? So those are spread out through various years. Okay.
Should've been on the.
I think it's time we looked at some records. How does that sound? Shirley, have you shared the screen with me yet?
Yes, I have.
Okay, let me figure out how to do it. Highlighted that. Do you see something that says Zoom phone is expanding your reach?
Yes.
A couple heads. Okay, here's what I've done. As the project I'm working on, because I volunteer for Family Search, I'm doing a census building project. And there a week ago, I was sweating how to present this, and this one just kind of fell into my lap. We're going to follow a family from 1860 through 1940, if I hit the right button. Now, I don't know where you're putting the little zoom part, so you may have to move it to see all of these things. The first one I'm going to do, this is for a lady in Washington County, and this is 1860. We know she was born, her name was Sally Hunt, and you notice which census schedule this is. This is the slave schedule. I don't know if this is actually her, but there is a Thomas Hunt who owned many slaves in Washington County. I am assuming that Sally is right in here, about right in the middle, because there are some young female slaves, 9, 10, 11. This could be her. We don't know, but it's a strong possibility. Okay, let's move to 1870. I'm going to make this big. Well, first of all, we're going to look at the top. We're still in Washington County. Census day, ooh, I have forgotten on 1870.
September 22nd.
1870, its census day is the 1st of June, but she was enumerated on the 22nd of September in Brenham. So we can look at this down here at the bottom. Her husband, Lemuel, and Sally, and their son, Bob, are living with someone named Cole, who is merchant. Lemuel is black, Sally is mulatto. The family they're living with is white. And we have, we can tell where they were born, South Carolina and Mississippi. So they have met, their owners may have brought them to Texas before the war. And then we have some little tick marks here. And oh, this is nice. I didn't know that these are on Ancestry. It's, if I put it right on there, it says, can you read, can you write? And they have a little tick mark. And I think this indicates that he cannot. And what's this other column here? He is a male citizen and over 21. Now, if you notice this column here, he has nothing because these columns here are asking the value of your real estate. So he evidently owns nothing.
But you're gonna bring them to the United States.
And then he evidently has no property because this is personal property. So he may be just living in a room with the Coles. We don't know. Because if you notice here, this is one household. So just because you find your ancestor, you need to look up and down a little bit. And this becomes really important in the later census because it actually gives addresses. Right now, this just gives the number of enumeration. Okay, let's move to, there's supposed to be a census record here. We can bring that up.
That one's hard to read.
1880.
He'll say.
Okay, we're still on Lemuel Blake.
Okay.
He is in Independence, Washington County. Census Day was to be the 1st of June, but he was enumerated on the 18th. And let's take a look here. This tells whether they are single or married. Well, the parents are married. We'll go in a little bit, or whether they're widowed. But it lists the children, their ages. And we'll go on across here. It asks about whether they were unemployed. Well, there's nothing in here. So we don't know. Are they sick? Well, nothing in here. Nothing in blind, deaf and dumb, idiotic, or insane. Someone is attending school, one of the kids, and cannot read, cannot write for the parents. And we're in 1880, and you may not be able to read this because this is pretty sloppy, but it gives the birthplace of the person and birthplace of their parents. This is a really good tool whenever you're trying to trace your ancestors back. Any questions before I hit 1900? Moving on.
There's no 1890.
Oh, yeah, 1890. 1890 is the one that burnt. There, you can get some information from perhaps a state census. There's a veterans schedule that we talked about on military records. But it's kind of hit and miss. My apologies, I'm not the one that burned it. Okay, now something Shirley mentioned on, okay. Again, we are in Burleson County now. So the people have moved a county over. And this county, or this was taken on the 6th day of June of 1900. We start getting into some good stuff. Yes, Shirley, it gives month of birth and year of birth. And it asks age of last birthday, married or single, and then how many years have you been married? This can give you an approximate marriage date. So if you're trying to fill in a blank in Family Search or Ancestry, you can say, well, they were born about, or they were married about 1868. That's a date. Something really helpful here on the mom, on Sally, mother of 12 with 8 living.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Now, the thing is, this can be helpful or it can be frustrating. On this one, it was frustrating. I can find no birth records for these other children. So that's, we know she had them. We don't know who they are. We don't know whether they're in Washington County, Burleson County. We're up in the air. Going across here. Now there's nothing in these boxes, but you need to be aware they're starting to ask questions about immigration. What year did you immigrate? number of years in the United States. Have you been naturalized? They ask, are you working? You know, what do you do? Farmer. Number of months unemployed. Did you attend, no, did you attend school? Did you read? Did you write? And if you notice, none of the kids are in school and they're 11 to 28 years old. So some of those younger ones should have been, but they were not in school. Something interesting here. Remember, this guy was born in slavery. 1870, he probably rented a room. Now, 1900, he owns F for farm. So, it's owned free. He owns it. He does not owe anybody for his land. So this gives you a good idea of your ancestor. You know, you can see how their fortunes increased in this case. And then they ask whether it's a farm or a house. And that's written over, but I think that says farm. So we've traced this guy now, or at least his wife, for about 40 years. So we're getting a feel for the family. 1910. Now we're in Galveston. Things have changed. Still the same people. They now have some grandchildren living with them. And there is a whole lot of information here. It tells you a couple of the daughters are widowed. It tells you one of their sons, who is still living with them, is divorced. Tells you one of the daughters, who is widowed, is the mother of 2 children, with 2 children living. And we have 3 grandchildren down here at the bottom. So there's another one that we picked up someplace, and I'll be honest with you, I have not been able to figure out who that 3rd child goes to. I've been able to figure out 2 of them by later census records. Sometimes you will have to take one record, put it with another record to get the whole story. This family, fortunately, was very consistent in their ages, place of birth. They are a little off here now. Sally says she was the mother of 11 with 8 living. Before it said 12, but hey, best we can do. Okay, let's move
That's
on
good.
over.
That one tells you where they're living too, gives an exact address.
Oh, does this one? Oh, yes, yes. 26th Street in Galveston. And thank you, I had missed that. I know that came later. It looks like they live at 214 26th Street in Galveston. You can go onto Google Earth and see if the house is still there. Thank you for pointing that out, whoever said that. Ask their immigration year and are they naturalized? Go on across here. Ask if they were employed or out of work. And it looks like Lemuel has been working the whole time. Now it says he can read and write. So maybe he's learned from his kids. Don't know. Again, it asks if you attended school. Do you own or rent? Remember, he owned the farm 10 years ago, but now he's renting. So something's happened. And it does tell you, let's see, I was going to say, I think it says he works on the docks. So he's working on the docks in Galveston. Now there's no marks for him on this one, but it does ask in 1910, are you a veteran? Are you blind? Are you deaf and dumb? Oh boy, I've only got a few minutes left. Now, notice anything strange about this census record?
New York.
New York, yes. Whoop, I wanted to back up. Part of the family has moved to New York now. Can't remember if mom made it on this because we're getting down into the kids. You know, I've covered a lot of things on this. I think this one has about 40 columns. Again, it's asking about immigration status, your education, your mother tongue, birthplace, mother and father. It asks what you're doing, and he works on a steamship. So worked on the docks in Galveston, and now he's working on the steamships here. In fact, the whole family, the men are working on a steamship line. Boy, it's getting really close to 8 o'clock. I'm going to skip.
We could stretch it at least 5, Jim.
Okay. Well, I'll just show you something weird about the 1930. One of the questions they ask, and they didn't, column 9 is, do you have a radio set? I've never figured out quite why they ask that, but they do. Yeah, that made me. Again, oh yeah, this is one where they do ask age of first marriage, but nobody put anything. Well, they did on some of them, but be on the lookout for this. It can give you some hints. And then the standard stuff, birthplace, yours, parents, language, immigration year, because people were still coming in like crazy. What you work, you know, what do you do for work? Are you a veteran? What war? Are you on a farm? Okay, 1940 is one that is very different. So I will end with this one. The big thing on this one is rather than ask where your parents are from, they ask where you are from and where were you 5 years ago? Where were you in 1935? So the form is very different. I guess we're coming out of the Depression. They're asking about a lot about your work, private work, public work, seeking work, has a job, other work. How many hours do you work? How many weeks out of work? And this guy, he's on a commodities project for the WPA. Remember, know your history. The WPA was going on at this time. The last thing I want to show you on this one, well, I have to go up here a little bit. There are two columns or two lines that are sample lines. There's one here, there's one up above. They have a heavier line. And then there are some supplemental questions down at the bottom. They do ask where the father and mother is from, the language, more on veteran status. What more questions on your occupation, a little more detail. Social Security had happened, but I don't think they were paying out. Do you have a Social Security number yet? Federal deductions for old age. I didn't know that was on there. I've never read this one. Interesting. I've just learned something new. So if the big takeaway on this is read the whole form and see the questions keep going on this one. You know, age of first marriage, but only on these two sample lines. And then they have some things for office use. Woo! I didn't think I'd get through this. Some of those I had to go over quickly, but know your form, know what's going on in the country, and some of the questions will make a little more sense, and take the time to think about some of the answers. Did they own land? Did they have a reversal of fortunes and lose it? So now they're renting. But you can get that good snapshot of what's going on with your ancestors. Now I'm going to say questions. I'm tired of talking. And if you're asking a question, you have to unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the early census that you were demonstrating the forms, they were very difficult to read. Is there any place that you can go to double check your question on the name that you're reading? Because I found it very hard to decipher some of the handwriting.
It can be, and some you just have to throw your hands up. Sometimes you will see some differences in the way they, I want to say, translate the name, because that's about what you're doing. Sometimes it's different in Ancestry. Sometimes it's different in Family Search. In Ancestry, if you find it, you can have user submitted comments. And quite often you will see different names typed in there. But this is the form. That's all we've got. And you kind of have to look at it and figure out what it is. There used to be a way, and I haven't seen it in a while, where you could change to a negative, where instead of black print on white, it was white print on black, and could make it a little more readable.
Invert.
And what?
It's called invert.
Invert.
On indexing, in indexing, it's called invert, and you can.
Okay, and you used to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And I haven't seen that feature in a while, but I haven't looked for it. Well, I'm going to stop sharing. So, oh, good, I get the thing back. Oh, I don't know who all we had. Now I can see who we had. Questions, comments?
Jim, on some of those that you were going over, when you put your cursor on their name, the print of their name came up. And if their name was abbreviated, it showed exactly the abbreviation for that name. Did you notice
Okay.
that when you were putting your cursor on it?
I did not notice that.
Okay.
Isn't that just a feature of Ancestry?
Yeah, see, something that I honestly didn't know it did. Whenever I put my cursor on the column, even though the person was way down in the list, it would bring up the column heading. And I go, that hasn't been doing that. So I don't know if that's a new feature. I know you could go up to the top and get it, but it was coming up when my cursor was in the middle. So things change all the time.
Good.
Okay. Shirley, did you make me host or just give me
I did.
shareability?
I made you.
Okay. And I always forget how to guide participants. Do I go to participants?
Yes, and then to more by my name.
Make host. Yes. Oh, good.
I'm the host now.
Good.
Thank you, Jim. That was really good. I learned some things.
Well, I just picked up some, I just saw a couple on there that I didn't know were on there.
I've never really done very much before 1850 because it was so hard to read, and you know the information was so.
Yeah, but there is some good information, and I only go there as a last resort. Very seldom do I go there.
You have anything else? Are there any other questions?
Thank you, Jim. That was really good.
Hey,